recreation. So, sediment management should not interfere with recreation after the deconstruction is completed. So, as we said, of course, we'll have to block the water trail as they're actually removing the dam. There's usually, your basic safety precautions where they're not going to let people, close to a construction site and et cetera. But the sediment management is designed to, is designed to be implemented in such a way that it does not affect areas downriver, does not affect wildlife or sensitive species downriver from the dam removal. So, the water level is drawn down slowly so that sediment isn't transported rapidly, things like that. And there are all kinds of procedures and requirements that have to be considered as we're thinking about sediment management. And the engineers will have to develop a sediment management plan. And like we've said several times, county, state, federal officials are going to have review of those plans before the removal. So in terms of recreation effects, of course, right during deconstruction, we affect some effect, but in terms of effects on Riverside or Frog Island Park or other places in Ypsilanti, we shouldn't see major effects, if any. I do want to talk about just expectations of what this site could look like, and there are a lot of caveats. I want to be really clear, about expectations here. So, every dam removal is unique. So you can look at pictures of what it looks like before and after in different places, and there are some beautiful spots that you'll find as you look around what this looks like before and after. But every dam removal is different, requires different strategies. But one example of how this looks in our watershed after a dam was removed and how the area revegetated and what it looks like afterwards is this slide. So Mill Creek Park is right near Dexter. There's a footbridge that connects into the Metro Park as you go under the railroad bridge along that boardwalk. And you can see that, a few years out, the grass came in, it revegetated pretty quickly. This photo is about, I think, 8 years after the dam was removed. And you can see they've planted some small trees that are coming up, things like that. This is a very different site than what we're talking about here. Mill Creek, much smaller river channel. It is a creek. We're talking about a river. They had a park that is, a different shape, and the boardwalk they have here goes through a park. And as Steve was talking about, the resolution was passed to keep a boardwalk going in front of private houses in the case of Penn. But this just gives you some idea of, what this looks like after it greens up in, sort of a similar area where you've got high banks, floodplain meadow type of landscape, sort of mixed as you go through a river stretch. So this is a basic expectation of what this can be. And of course, Dexter since then has added a whole bunch of other additional amenities. If you go down to that park, they've added art installations and overlooks and landings for canoes and kayaks and everything. You'll see people fishing in this area and kayaking through and et cetera. But all of those things are things that usually and often come later after the restoration happens. In terms of just, what does the Huron River look like very long term when we start talking about, generational change over, 30, 50 years as trees mature. The best indicator we have on this is what it looks like right below the dam and as it goes through Ypsilanti. So, stretch where you have a mix of high banks, some low-lying areas that are floodplain meadows. So if you want a sense of what it could be in a totally natural state, you can look down below LaForge Road as you're going past Highland Cemetery. That's a good stretch to look as just an indicator of what the river channel will look like, or what the physical presence of that river will be. But as I've said, providing input earlier in this restoration, this visiting process, specifically as it relates to the park, that's really important for us. I'm really interested in hearing what gets people excited about this space, but also what you'd like to make sure that you maintain from the way it is currently, so that we can build that into planning processes going forward. So I'll stop there and I'll hand it back over to Summer.
All right, awesome. I'm gonna thank you, Dan and Steve, Councilmember. We're gonna go ahead. Let me just get my screen shared again. Hold on one second. All right. Okay, let's see here. There we go. All right, everybody should be able to. All right, so just a couple of things before we get started to make sure that we're all on the same page just as it relates to engagement for today. We want to just be mindful of our comment timing. I'm going to trust that we'll not have to have a timer up there, that we can self-govern ourselves as much as possible, but we do want to be mindful. It's 8:00 and we're, scheduled to go to make sure that we have, to get everybody in. But we also want to be, mindful of the evening time as well. I will unmute individuals once you have used the raise hand feature, as well as, and if you don't have the raise hand feature at the bottom, because some Zoom, if you haven't updated the app, then sometimes you don't have that. Then there's a gesture or reaction. There's a reaction button that you can use, like a hand clap, or you can use that, or literally you can raise your hand in the screen so that I'm able to call you just in case. If you don't have any of those options, we can use that as an option as well. We want to try to find solutions as a collective. Again, we've been able to to talk about the concerns, and want to definitely have those, but also we want to talk about the vision and what that looks like, bigger picture as well. And then being engaged is important. It does talk about accountability, not just from the community side, but also from the municipality and partner side. But we want to make sure that we're rooted in respect, right? And so through all the passion in it, we want to make sure that we're rooted in respect, as well as just being thoughtful of our neighbors and each other. And then just for tonight, we have 3 meetings as we described earlier in the conversation. One was focused from the perspective of the landowners. There are things that are specific to their concerns about their property and things like that, which is very important. And we had that last week. Today, we want the conversation to be about those that uses the river and the park as from a recreational perspective. So again, it gives us an opportunity to report and gather all the information per demographics, right? And we know that everybody is not going to have the same perspective, and that's fine. That's what we're here to do. We're not all monolithic in our thought process. So I want to make sure that we keep ourselves, grounded within that. But let's be mindful that this is from the perspective of using the park or using the river as a recreationist. And then if you want to submit comments, you can do that online. We did have a couple of residents that did submit comments online. And as I said, we will have all of this information that we're collecting from each of these meetings that will be presented into a report form that we will submit to the DNR. That is the purpose of this. This is when Daniel was going through the grid as it relates to engagement. This is a part of it in order to continue to do and research as the conversations about removing the dam happens. This presentation, the deck that Councilmember Wilcoxon as well as Daniel that they presented today will be submitted as a PDF and posted online for those that need those documents. So again, be mindful of our timing, hand raise features, and we're going to go ahead. And again, the questions that we're going to talk about here, we're going to facilitate them at the end. Again, we want to keep it to the topic that's on hand. And at the end, we will open it up. If there's other things that were missed or you would like to share, we will allow for that. At that time, we'll make sure that all comes into the equation when we are done. So with that, and we're going to be able to take the notes and everything on the screen So I'm going to go ahead and go to the first question, which is why is this project important to you? So let me expand out my screen just to make sure that I'm able to see everyone. So again, this can be from multiple perspectives as to why this is important to you. If it could be from a resident perspective, from a user perspective, but why is this project important to you? And so again, you can use the raise the hand method, the reaction, and I'll go from there. So I will unmute you, Beth. You should be able to unmute. And then after you, Beth, we will go to the next person.
Hi, so I'm Beth Gibbons. I serve on the Ypsilanti Sustainability Commission, and I'm part of the engagement committee or subcommittee for this. To me, this is a really important project because I see the city having basically a once in a lifetime opportunity to make a choice about a piece of infrastructure that really affects both the natural health and the safety and well-being of people in our area. I really want to see the river restored to its natural state. I think it's an opportunity for us to take action at a local level that will be in line with that kind of restoration and care for nature. I also think that as a person who uses the impoundment, I kayak, I canoe, and I would love to just see that area expanded. Like, I understand the attractiveness of having the impoundment as still water, but we also have a lot of still water nearby. And so to have this whole stretch restored, I think would be really beautiful. It would be a really wonderful asset. It would make it easier to be able to actually get down and to paddle past like the other beautiful parts of Ypsilanti that you can only see from the river. And so I'm just excited for it. I've seen care for the river and connection to the river as a top value that's come out in both the sustainability plan survey as well as the master plan surveys that have happened. And so I feel like, really taking steps that care for the river, care for the people around it is critical for us.
Okay. All right, great. Thanks, Beth. The next individual is Amanda. I'm going to go ahead and ask you to mute, and then Nikki, you're after Amanda. So go ahead, Amanda.
Hi, my name is Amanda Smith. I live about a mile and a half away from the site. My background that you can see is actually of my daughter paddling the Cascades at Argo. I would love for her to be able to do things like this here. I know there was some concern expressed last week about whether or not this would be something accessible to children. I just want to be really clear that my 6-year-old is capable of doing a whole lot of things, including a 15-mile paddle that she did in her own kayak yesterday down the Manistee River. I would love for us to use the asset of the Huron in Ypsilanti in a way that actually can be beneficial to the city and to all of us. I'd love for us to have more access. I'd love for us to take a little bit of the market share from Ann Arbor in terms of that paddling asset. Yes, I do appreciate being able to paddle the pond, and it's nice that I can hop over there on my lunch break and get a quick paddle in, but there's so many other places that we can have a flat water paddle and so much opportunity that could be built in using this asset for what it is capable of. And one of the other things I wanted to point out is the 15-mile paddle that we did yesterday was on the Senni National Wildlife Refuge. And what made that paddle wonderful was the fact that it was in a natural state. And I would love to see us come as close as we can more to a natural state for the Huron in this space. And that's all I have to say right now. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And I am going to thank you, Amanda. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, Nikki. You should be able to speak now. And then Trisha, you're next after Nikki.
Hello, good evening, everybody. My name is Nikki Van Bloom, and I'm actually here for 2 reasons. One, I am the trail specialist for the DNR for Southeast Michigan. The Huron River is one of our nine state designated water trails, so I am certainly interested in what's happening with that and its continued or increase navigability. And then two is I'm also a city resident here, so I was able to kind of knock out both things with one meeting. But at this point, I am interested in, and you've covered a lot of this, but in hearing how the dam removal will affect people being able to paddle the river and some of the overall effects on the water trail.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Nikki. All right, Trisha, I'm going to go ahead and you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Okay, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Something that really resonated with me was that we should take back some of this recreation opportunity from Ann Arbor, and I'm totally behind that. And if you look at what Ann Arbor has as far as paddling recreation, there's both fast flowing water, which would be like between the Argo Dam and down to Getty's Lake, and there's flat water paddling too. And people have the option of participating in either one, where if they start up at the top at Argo, they can go through the Cascades, through the faster water, and then on to Getty's Lake. Well, something Ann Arbor has is a transportation from one to the other, where, unless you have the transportation, it's not really feasible just to have a one-way paddle without arranging transportation yourself. Where now what we have on the pond is an out and back situation, which is accessible from Penn Park. And you can actually paddle up to the pond north of the Superior Dam too, and the impoundment isn't that difficult to cross. I have wheels I put under my kayak because I don't like to drag it on the path, but it can be done. On the other hand, if you go the other direction, my experience was that picture that was shown, the idyllic picture with the trees on both sides, that was an awesome part of the river to paddle through. But once you get past that, you get into areas with large rocks, and it's more shallow, and you get hung up on the rocks, and it was not enjoyable for me. And in fact, it was not feasible to paddle back up. And so, I had to get off at Riverside Park and arrange for transportation back. And so that makes it so it will not be a lunchtime paddle unless you do arrange to have someone pick you up downstream. So that's just my opinion. If we want something closer to what, Ann Arbor has for recreation opportunities, I think that, having a pond here, fits the bill, because then you have, the still water and the fast water options.
Okay. Thank you, Trisha, for your feedback. I have Georgina. I'm going to go ahead and ask for you to unmute yourself, and Bill, you are next after her.
Hello, I'm Georgina Hickey. I am a city resident and a fairly avid paddler, but also just avid river enjoyer. I've paddled all these sections, so I'm familiar with them. Probably anyone who's done it knows that trying to put in at Penn Park in its current state is very difficult. Actually had trouble finding my way down to where I could get in because there were people fishing there. So I think, generally improving this area and making the river more accessible is going to be a great bonus to the city in general, whether you're on the water or you want to be next to it. And I just think that we have this amazing, amazing asset. And so expanding on that and naturalizing it, returning it to its natural state is a pretty amazing opportunity, and of course a way to mitigate some real liabilities we have with the current situation that is there. So I'm very enthusiastic about this project, certainly having watched some of the other projects, particularly the one in Dexter, and seeing just what a revolution has happened in downtown Dexter by really capitalizing on the river as part of the city. And I'm just super eager to see Ypsilanti make better use of this resource. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Georgina. Okay, Bill, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute yourself. You should be able to, and Mark, you're after Bill.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Okay, I represent, I guess, a different group of recreationists, namely birders and bird watchers, but also people who just enjoy the scenic views along the river. My wife and I have looked for birds extensively along the Huron, especially in Waterworks Park, just downstream, and in North Bay Park. We've gone to that park for probably 20 years. And I wanted to mention a great source of data for those who are planning this project, and that is ebird.org. eBird, it's a site for birders that's administered by Cornell University. And so on that site, there are a number of hotspots for birding in these various parks. So Waterworks and North Bay, and Riverside and Frog Island. And then I suggested Peninsular Park as a hotspot about a year ago. So we've been going there regularly. And in that year, we've documented about 80 species of birds throughout the year. Just for comparison, going a little bit further downstream at Waterworks, there are 152 species documented. And at North Bay, 199 species. So this is a great place for birding. North Bay is the fifth ranked site in all of Washtenaw County right now in terms of the number of species. Waterworks is close behind; it's in the top 40. I think that Peninsula Park could certainly reach that potential too, especially if it had more of a kind of a marshy area. I certainly would agree with everyone else that it'd be wonderful to see it restored to a more natural area.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Okay. Hold on one second. I just want to make sure that you can see, it should be able to see it on the screen. Hold on one second. Let me just make sure. It must have reshifted because see. Okay. All right. Just want to make sure that we have those notes. Okay, Mark, I'm going to go ahead. Thank you, Bill, for your feedback. Mark, I am going to unmute you, and you should be able to unmute yourself, and you're good to go. Okay. Thank you, Mark. Maria, you are Next, and then Randy, you're following Maria. So Maria, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Okay. Hi, I'm Maria Goodrich. I'm a city resident and I also serve on the restoration subcommittee. I'm also a lecturer at EMU. I have a background in aquatic ecology and microbiology, but I'm here primarily tonight as a recreationist who takes advantage of both of the Stillwater impoundment and the flowing reaches and the other impoundments upstream and downstream of the Penn Dam. And we do have a lot of impoundments on the Huron. I'm primarily a Stillwater paddler, but I've really enjoyed exploring the free-flowing parts of the river. And as a parent of a young child, those free-flowing areas are the parts where my child has most been able to engage with the river, to be able to splash in the shallows and catch bugs, and just clamber around the banks. That feels less safe in the impoundment, and this is just my qualitative impressions. Like the Huron is an amazing river. The impounded sections are, they're real turbid. They're in places real choked with invasive. They're a very different ecosystem, and the recreation opportunities are different. But I have loved watching the evolution of the restoration following the dam removals at Mill Creek and on the Boardman River. And I'm so excited about the potential in this opportunity for our community, both for reducing possible hazards to the humans in our community, especially as climate change increases some of the risks from aging high hazard dams like ours, but also I've spent a lot of time in Penn Park, and that's a cool little park. It's got a really neat assortment of native trees, and I would love to see what that could become if we had the chance to restore that whole area to a real riparian floodplain. So I'm very excited for the possibilities, and I'm very excited to hear what the rest of our community has to say and what they're looking for as well.
Okay, thank you, Maria. Randy, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. You should be able to unmute yourself now. There you go. Go ahead,
Yes.
Randy.
Yeah, I have some concerns that I'd like to bring forward. Number one is the sediment that's currently behind the dam. It seemed to me in the presentation that understanding the quality of the sediment is in the later phases of the project and not in the beginning phases of the project, which says to me that once we start deconstruction, whatever sediment is there will move downstream. So I'm guessing, my question would be, what mitigation efforts are we taking to make sure that there's not pollutants there that'll be moved downstream? Second, I'm concerned about nuisance algae on Ford Lake. I live on Ford Lake. And we do have an algae problem that's been studied for probably 25 years with no solutions. But one of the benefits of a dam like Penn Dam is that it does aerate the water. As the water goes across the top of the dam, it gets aerated and it gets cooled. And that's beneficial to controlling algae. So when that dam is removed, it could have a negative impact on the algae in Ford Lake. And I didn't see anything in tonight's presentation that is addressing that, or if that's even being considered in terms of the downstream impacts. Thirdly, I'm also, kayak and canoe. I've canoed all these parts of the river. You're completely right on the Superior Dam. That portage is terrible, as is Penn Dam. That portage through there is terrible. So, I think those things could be improved without removing the dam. And I'd like to know, is there a plan for once, it seems like this is a foregone conclusion that we're taking the dam out. But if that's true, where will the canoe launch be? And has that been planned and budgeted?
So Summer, I can jump in on some of those questions since they're
Yes.
real specific. So Randy, you're concerned about the sediment sampling mitigation efforts. That really is something that starts actually quite early in the process. It's actually one of the first things that begins in terms of dam removal is studying, what's in the sediment, how much sediment is where in the impoundment. The actual sediment mitigation plan has to follow the other parts of the process in studying the impoundment, just because the information isn't available to set up the sediment management plan until those other things are done. So it's an order of operations, but the sediment sampling, mitigation, and the evaluation, that entire process goes through the entire length of the project. And we work closely with especially state officials, but also federal officials in some cases. DNR is involved, Eagle's involved, HHS is involved. So there are several folks with in the various state departments that have eyes on that. But it does. So if I gave the impression that it comes at the end, that's not correct. It really continues throughout, and it's just the order of operations, the way things have to happen in an order, because that's when the information becomes available.
Thanks for that clarification.
Yeah. Regarding the nuisance, algae, the concerns you raised on Ford Lake. So we have thought about it. It's complicated. So you are correct that the spillover cools the water, but it's more about the entire temperature profiles that's going through the impoundment and through that whole stretch of the river if there's an effect there. So just I don't have more information than that, other than that's something else that you're right. We need to think about, and we are. So I think those are the technical questions that you had.
Yeah, and the last one was there a place for a new canoe launch or not?
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So of course, that's going to be largely up to what the city says. There's nothing prohibiting it that I can see in any of the information we have that would preclude launches really anywhere on that park. It's really just whatever the plan should be based on what the feedback is to the city. So it could stay relatively close to where it is now. It could move elsewhere. But there's nothing, really blocking anything on any of that.
All right. Okay. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Randy. Thank you, Dan, for that. I'm going to go ahead and I have Lisa. I'm going to unmute you. Laura, you're after Lisa. So Lisa, you should be able to unmute yourself.
I'm all set. Thank you, Summer. Thank you for your facilitation, and thank you to the Restoration Subcommittee for having these meetings. I think it's really important. I am a 24-year resident of the city, a proud resident. I've raised my two boys here, and we have spent a lot of time in and around the river. I also my day job is working in the arena of environment and conservation and public health. I run the Michigan League of Conservation Voters. And so I use the river currently as a paddler, and I run along the river in all different parts of the river watershed. So I know this river pretty well. And I soon will be an angler. I'm not an angler, although I am a new member of the Anglers of the Osable. And so a lot of people learn to become an angler in the mighty Huron, and I am about to do that. I'm also a member of the board of directors of the Huron River Watershed Council. I'm an appointee from the city, and I've been doing that for a few years. So I have learned very close and up close and personal way about the amazing work that the Huron River Watershed Council does. And I will say, without hyperbole, that this organization is one of the best in the nation. And its stewardship of this river through many counties is something that so many others around this state and country have a lot of envy about. They know how to steward rivers. They've done amazing projects up and down the watershed, and we're very, very lucky to have them be a part of this project. I also want to say that I trust the science, and the science tells us that dams are not good for rivers. And at this point in human history, with the things that we're actually facing as a species, it is incumbent upon us to make the best decisions about stewardship and resilience and taking care of the things that actually provide life to us, and water is one of them. I think there's a unique opportunity for the city to lead in this project. To restore the river in this way is something that I know that the city is taking very seriously, and I hope at a certain point in time we'll be able to say is complete and that we're very proud to have done and be an example for other cities up and down the watershed. Finally, I'll say that as a runner, I will share what others have said. I think Georgina, maybe Beth, and certainly Maria focused on what's possible at Penn Park. And I have run and spent time in Penn Park, and there is so much more that the city residents deserve, and the township residents deserve in a park that abuts the river. It's something that we should be celebrating, and right now I don't believe Penn Park is that. So with that, I'll say thank you and for the opportunity.
All right, thank you, Lisa. Laura, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Okay, thank you. I've just wanted to put in that I'm hoping that we take concern for the whole range of people that use the river. And for me, part of being on a stiller part of the river has been the experience of having my mother here living with us in the last years of her life, and how easy the access was and how peaceful it was for her to spend time on the water and near the water. And that she could combine a place to be quiet, a place to be safe, and a place to watch birds and wildlife easily, in spite of some growing infirmities. And I think there's lots to be said for active recreation, but I think it's also important to think in terms of how the river provides places for people who can't necessarily engage.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Sally. I'm going to unmute. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, I have. Thank you, Summer. I wanted to reiterate and support what Mark had said earlier. While I was listening to the people talking about restoring the river to the natural state, I really wondered about, after 150 years, what really is the natural state and what differences would be seen other than the lack of the pond. And I wanted to make sure that this point was included in all of the written material, that it is almost 150 years old that the dam has been here. The other point about that I wanted to make was that a professor of hydrology has indicated, don't dam rivers, but if it's dammed, don't take it out. So that I think is an important point, and we're talking about, as we've said before, a very short area of the river, and it's not going to make a huge change in the rest of the river to change this portion between Superior Dam and Penn Dam. And it seems like we should follow the advice of the professor of hydrology. Don't take it out. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. I'm going to, let's see. All right, Ben, I'm going to ask you can go ahead and unmute yourself. Ben, you should be able to unmute yourself now. There you go.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'd like to say that I appreciate the fact that we've spent a fair amount of time talking about restoration and revegetation. But I want to point out a couple of things. First, it's pretty clear in this area that if you just leave it alone, it's going to revegetate very, very quickly, but mostly with invasive species. So that revegetation with the native species actually requires some effort and some intervention and a budget. And one of the things that I think is extremely important about this project is we all have a vision for what we would like to see. And part of the problem is putting that into a budget and seeing how much of that we can afford. Now, what I haven't seen is a budget item that says this is how much we're going to invest in the restoration of the exposed land. And this is a plan that people who work on revegetation and restoration say is feasible with that budget. And there are other things in that plan that have also been referenced. The Princeton Hydro report in several specific places says, here are items that are going to be important to this project, but they are not included in the budget. And one of those is scouring the foundations of the bridge. Others are some of the construction items. If this is the project we're going to do, it's very important for us to know how much it's going to cost. And so I would just like to see those things attended to before we make a commitment to spend a large amount of money.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and going to move to make sure we move to the next question and be mindful again of just our time. And I think this question is important. As I was explaining, last week, but just those that are, from IPSI, right? Like this is, there are some nostalgia feelings that are connected to parts of the removal of the dam and what that is and memories. And so I do think that that's important to understand just, some of those feelings of what that looks like in terms of the removal and the connection to any type of, so I don't know if there's anybody who is, from IPSI, born, raised, they have a lot of nostalgia and feelings. I mean, we had a couple of residents, IPSI, residents that did share that last time when we had the landowner meeting. I don't know if that's anyone here today that would like to share as well. Again, you can use the hand icon or the reaction or just wave in the screen. So I see Anne, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. You should be able to, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Sure, okay, thank you. Great. Not born and raised in Ypsilanti, but I've been here 43 years. And so I'm probably one of the only people on the call that has actually been here since the Peninsula Paper Company was actually functioning back in the early 70s and mid 80s. I also want to say that as a chair of the Ypsilanti Park Commission, I'm one of the members who actually founded Friends of Peninsula Park. So I want to speak from that perspective in terms of that it is very, it is a memory for me, and it is a one that I cherish. It's one that I think speaks to who Ypsilanti is. I have struggled over the last couple of years with this because if this was upstream or downstream, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation. Because it is historic and that it would be, I think, considered something that would be cherished. So from that perspective, I give you 43 years of having lived here, having watched Peninsula Paper Company in operation, having seeing water turn colors yellow, blue, green, red on occasion, and am extremely concerned about the fact that although people have said, and I know Dan Brown has been, instrumental in getting the studies done and the sedimentation reports, I'm not convinced that we aren't going to release a lot of pollution in terms that will be hazardous, not only to what we consider this restoration of the river, but to those residents along the river. So that is very much at the top of my list. The other thing that concerns me is the fact that, one, this dam and this park in particular was neglected by the city for nearly 20 years. So had it not been for the Friends of Peninsula Park, we hosted the very first with Darrell Graham, the Ypsilanti Huron River Day, which we partnered with the Livery in Ann Arbor in 2016 to have people be able to canoe and kayak down the river. We worked with the Huron River Watershed Council actually to get that floating dam or floating dock in the right above the dam. So I want to make sure that in all of these conversations, one, that brown and Black people are not excluded from this conversation, because those are pretty much the residents that live in those apartment complexes and city residents. As I said, I've been here 43 years, and beyond Brian Foley and a few others, I don't know who's been engaged in this conversation. So one, Summer, if you would take it upon yourself, and not giving you work to do, but I think you need to speak with some original residents from this community to get their perspective. And the second thing is to take into consideration the pollution that will be released. And I hear people talking about, increasing recreational opportunities. The river is and I think one of the things I got out of the Huron River Watershed Council is the fact that the Huron River is and can be an economic driver. And that's one of the things that I have pushed for over the years. But again, with this dam removal, for me, it's very personal, because I have been here 43 years and I have seen the operation of that plant. I saw it shut when people lost their jobs, and I saw the apartment building go up, which is a good thing. That's, again, economic development. But at the same time, I want to make sure that all citizens are engaged in this process. And I mean Ypsilanti natives, people that were born and bred here, that knew this as an operation, grew up with this as a historic feature in their city, and want to know how they feel about it.
Okay, thank you for that, Ann. Definitely is important for sure. Trish, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. You should be able to. Unmute yourself.
Okay, I should be unmuted.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Ann, for bringing up some of those topics. I mean, these things have been on my mind too. The residents that live in those apartments, have they been engaged at all? I mean, the only reason I found out about these meetings was because one of my neighbors knocked on my door and handed me a flyer. We see a lot of people fishing along the river, not just at the park, but off of the railroad bridge and off of Superior Bridge. And a lot of the local residents, I mean, they don't stick to the paved paths. They get to the river how they get to it, and they, enjoy fishing on the pond, as in its current state. As far as the historic value, the building really represents the industrialization, and that's a piece of Ypsi, a piece of America, really, and people are really connected to the historic building. What I'm wondering is, how do you maintain a building that's connected to a concrete dam? I mean, it's going to take a lot of dynamite to get rid of that solid concrete dam. And how do you do that without destroying the historic structure? And, I don't know how it can be done. And if it can't be done, then, you need to tell the people that think they're going to be preserving it, because I have serious doubts about it. And as far as the pollution along the river, that's, been a major topic, but also the debris under the water. I mean, out there kayaking, I've seen, like, in the middle of the river, a concrete block that was just, like I could touch it with my oar. It was like less than 2 feet under the surface, which means there's something underneath sticking up. And we don't know what's going to be there when the water's drained. We don't know what there's going to be left to clean up. Not just, the sediments and any toxic substances, but also the debris. Who's going to do that?
Okay.
And as far as
all right.
one more quick point, sorry. As far as the economic drivers, yes, we should absolutely, capitalize on the river, and the river runs through downtown. And that's, in my opinion, through Depot Town and through downtown, that's the place to do it.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Summer, I need to jump in here real quick one more time. So the comment about dynamite that's been floated around at a few meetings now, and that is speculation at best and misinformation at worst. I have not heard any engineer in any of the conversations that we've had mention dynamite once, and the Princeton Hydro people discussed how the removal could be separated of the dam, could be separated from the actual powerhouse structure. Requires heavy equipment, requires chiseling out pieces of the dam slowly over time. This dam actually has wooden logs that can release the water if they're removed. No mention of dynamite. So I really want to make that clear, that at no point in all of our discussions has that come up.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Tricia. I just want to make sure that we keep to the question, because again, we'll have a time at the end if it's something outside of that. But I need to. It's the nostalgia, the memories of what that is, and the importance of that. So if once I call on you, if you can stick to that. If you're outside of question number 2, we're gonna have to move that to the end so that we can keep it moving. Sophia, I'm gonna go ahead and unmute you. And you should be able to unmute yourself, Phil.
Are you, let's see. Yeah,
yep, there you go. Yep,
okay, so my name is Phil Rupp. I've lived at 6150 First Road since 93, and I chose this dwelling because of proximity to the river. When I moved to my house, the prairie land between First Road, where I live, and the river was undeveloped, and it was an easy 200-yard portage to the river. So the esoteric aspects of the impoundment, I think, as it is, are pretty easy to overlook. The willingness to remove the dam just for the purpose of draining the impoundment and perhaps removing the city's responsibility for a dam if it fails. I think it's a bit short-sighted. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sally, getting ready to unmute you. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay, Summer?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. We purchased our property in '88 here. And so it's been 33 years that we have been building our house and then moving into it and living here. I don't know if that qualifies us as a native. Maybe we can be called semi-natives after that many years. And the only reason we are here is the pond. It was the view here that with this land that caused us to buy it and build our house. So that's how this project would impact us. Our memories from the time we found it, shared it with my parents who helped build our house, our whole family who helped build our house, our providing the woodwork in the house from the trees around this land. We have a lot of history with it, and it's very important to us, and the pond is essential in that.
All right, thank you. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and move to the next question. So obviously there's a lot of things about the river and the use of the river that a lot of people on this call like you enjoy. So what is it that, like, hey, we want to keep that, or, oh, that part of it, is not as favorable in terms of just your ability to use the river, the park, like what is that in the sense of like, that is enjoyable that you would like to keep? And this is not related to just the dam, just the use of it, just in general. That is like, oh, we had this would be great. Or I see Ben, I'm going to unmute you. You should be able to unmute yourself. Go ahead.
Well, the straightforward answer is I'd like to keep the pond. The things that I would like to change is that I'd like to improve Penn Park. And I'd like to allow us to have a very good portage around the dam. That's a solid dam. It's probably going to be there in another 100 years. But I think if we keep that pond, We have the fast water below the dam. We build ourselves a good portage. We clean up Penn Park. That's what I would like to see. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. And you are next, Amanda. You're after Ann.
Hi, I think because you said this is not related to the dam, this is the other features.
Yeah, just in terms of just in general. Yep, as a user of nature and yeah.
Oh, sure. So yeah, I mean, I think that the powerhouse is important, and I think that the signage is important. I think that having been an advocate for that park for the last 10 years, and I think Bonnie Wessler's on here. I mean, I have a video of Bonnie Wessler and Teresa Gelati meeting me at that park on a Sunday afternoon because of the condition of that park. So I mean, I want to say it's been disappointing that the city has not kept up maintenance. I mean, one of the things, the stairs, going down to the portage area there. And I think that benches, would be important for me to sit along the river. I think that a good walking trail would have been important. The stairs we have worked with for years. The stairs that connect the apartments down to the park have never, ever been de-weeded that I'm aware of. I mean, the Friends of Penn Park did that several years ago, but it's a job and it needs to be taken care of. So I think those stairs and lighting down there, because the stairs are so bad that people have created a path down the side. But from my perspective, the stairs going down to the water are so bad, they are more hazardous to me than what people have indicated the dam is. I mean, those stairs are literally dangerous. I mean, if you walk down there, there's beavers and everything else that you have to get their permission to walk down there before you can get to the water. So for me, keeping that powerhouse, that signage, maybe some park benches along there, and being able to use that facility so that community members could even meet there or have recreation there. But I think for me, it's just the city needs to do a better job of maintenance.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Ann. I have, let me go up here and see who I have next. Amanda, you're next. And then Beth, you're behind Amanda. So Amanda, I'm going to go ahead and you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi there. I just wanted to make a couple points about the things that I think would be really helpful there in that space. I think I'm really excited about there not being a portage there for a through trip if we were to paddle the dam or paddle the pond or the river in that spot. So I've got a 6-year-old dancing in front of me in this moment. The other pieces that I think are really important to me are as much as we can do to make a variety of use in the space. If there's ways to make some shallows for kids to splash and play, and also some faster spots of the river, that's excellent. If there's ways to keep no, please stop dancing. If there's ways to keep some focus on native species, bringing back original and I want to make the point that there's somebody who said earlier that we don't know what it was like 150 years ago. Of course we don't, but it certainly wasn't originally a man-made dam. So I want whatever we can do to bring the health of the river back as much as possible. I think we could have a really beautiful space for all of the people in Ypsilanti and the surrounding areas if we put some focus there. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Amanda. Let's see. Beth, you are next. I'm going to cue you to unmute yourself. You should be able to unmute yourself. Okay. There you go.
Yep, there we go. So to me, I'm really interested in how we connect the history of this part of the river and this part of the city to people who are here and who will come here in the future. I know that there's a really rich history of use of Penn Park and the story of the paper plant. I've only been in Ypsi for the last 7 years, and I would love to be able to better know that. So as we're thinking about the restoration of this space, really creating that kind of signage that tells the story. It can tell the story of the river. It can tell the story of the paper plant. It can tell the story of Ypsilanti. I'd like us to, I don't know how this is done. I'm an expert in climate change and climate change impacts, but I'm not an expert in river restoration, though other people here are. I'm really interested in how we maintain the kind of the kind of fishery that is there now. I recognize that the fishery below the dam is there because of the dam, but like, what's the work that we can put in so that people who have had a history and generations of coming to this place and using this river as a fishing spot will be able to continue to do that in some way? And so I'm really interested in what's the kind of river management that can be put in place so that recreationists of all sorts who have historically used this will be able to continue to use it.
Okay. All right. Sally, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. As is probably pretty obvious, what I would like to keep is the pond. What would you like to change? I would like to, for those adventurous water people, that if they had the kind of thing that's been built at Argo Dam, to use that for recreational purposes, I think that would be great. I'm not going to be using it, but I think it'd be great for other people to have that opportunity.
Okay, great. Let's see, Trisha, you are next. You should be able to unmute yourself, Trisha.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, my thoughts are a little bit more scattered now after hearing those comments and wanting to respond. I think we can tell the story of Ypsi by having, a good access to a historic site and a place where people can come and gather and, maybe like a little mini museum or something with our plaques with information that they can learn from and, appreciate the history. That can all be done with or without the pond. And, I'm in full support of having, better access to that whole site. But there's been a lot of talk about restoring the health of the river. I don't think that the pond is sick. I mean, what I see is a lot of wildlife. I see, I can look out my back door and see the lotus flowers on the river, and you just don't see those many places. And, I can go out there and I can paddle by them and smell them. And, this is something unique that we have, and it's part of the pond, and it won't be there with the river. It doesn't, they don't survive on the river. And I think it would be a shame just to flush it all down the river.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trish. Maria, you are next, and Marjorie, you're after Maria. Maria, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Got it. Thank you. One thing I'd really love to keep is the natural biodiversity, especially the diversity of mature native trees that we have at Penn Park. I would love for us to, in the process of restoration, be able to remove some of the buckthorns, especially the invasives, especially the really dense buckthorn that prevents river access in Penn Park as it is now. And if we had the opportunity to help reseed a more natural riparian zone with native riparian species and take into account community input on how we can shape a vision for that park that gives people access. I think there's potential for so much more river access in a restored Penn Park. And also, as depending on what the plan is for removal, it would be really cool to see the maintenance of some accessible slackwater sites like we often see upstream of former dams or dam removals, so that you get that sort of mix of slack water and fast moving water, and just make sure that we're very intentional about including access points for the variety of different recreational uses that folks, both city residents and from beyond who come to Penn Park for recreation, would want to take advantage of.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Marjorie, you are next, and Bill, you are behind Marjorie. Marjorie, you should be able to unmute yourself.
I just did. Thank you. And Summer, thank you so much for the excellent job that you're doing in facilitating this. I think we all appreciate it so much. So let me talk about what I would like to keep. I would like to keep the pond. It has historical significance and people have used it for generations. Also, I would like to just address the fact that the Huron River Council does need to get their finances realistic. There is no money in any discussion that we have had for the restoration. They say it's naturally going to happen. Having done some research on that, when the river may be taken back, we create mud flats that creates odor, that creates a exposure of all of the dumping that has been done on. So there does need to be a dollar amount put into restoration. Also, I would just like to challenge the Huron River Council and their report just regarding the use of the Penn Park. They say that not a lot of people have used it. Part of that is because of the inability of the fine city of Cincinnati of Ypsilanti, in their financial state to allocate dollars to it. I am a member of the Friends of Peninsular Park. We have donated dollars, time, volunteer efforts, and community outreach to improve that park. We have tried to help the city of Ypsilanti by giving of ourselves, money, and our brain power to bring that park up to at least a usable area. It's still not there, as Ann Brown has mentioned, but we are trying and we are very committed to the city of Ypsilanti to do that. I would like to keep the powerhouse, the iconic sign. I would like to keep the procedure that has been put into place for all of the sports people who enjoy kayaking and the river sports. I am not a kayaker, but I love the bird watching. I love watching the swans come onto the river. With a demolishing of the dam, and I'm not using the term dynamite, with the demolishing of the dam, you change the personality. And we do not know what that personality will be on the river.
Okay.
Restoration of the dam would equal something significant. It is perhaps stronger and maybe more beneficial to restore rather than to demolish. And so those are my items. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Marjorie. Bill, you are next. You should be able to unmute yourself. Yep, let me see. Make sure you should be able to unmute yourself now, Bill. There you go.
Yes, I just wanted to speak in favor of, I already mentioned my love of the birds along the Huron, and that I would love the park to be restored to a more natural state. I do not mean by that that the dam should be removed. And in that sense, I would agree with many of you who have spoken that you would love to keep the pond. It's just that the park, as Ann Brown so eloquently spoke, and the members of the Friends of the Park have spoken, the park needs so much more care than it's been getting. One point of comparison could be Waterworks Park, again, just down the river. That's another park that needs a lot more care than it's been getting, but at least it has a decent path through the park, and that path gets lots of use, based on just the birder statistics. I studied it, and it gets 20 to 50 visits a month just from birders. And that's, there are many, many other people. Every time we go there, we see walkers, families, lots of people out enjoying the park. But it's because it's got a decent path, and it's, an enjoyable place to be. I don't think that can be said for Peninsular, unfortunately. And there's so much potential in that park. And that would also include keeping the dam.
Okay, thank you so much. So this question is specific to, those that are bird watchers or fishing, just so not kayaking, not just specifically to bird watching and fishing, or do you have any concerns about the removal because of your ability, and that's going to be the limitation of that? So specifically to bird watching or those that fish. Okay, Mark, you should be able to unmute yourself. Okay, thanks, Mark. Amanda, you are next, and Bill, you're after Amanda. Go ahead, Amanda. Again, specifically to you as a bird watcher or that you fish. You fish. So if you can give me to that specifically, that'd be great. So go ahead, Amanda.
Hi. Yeah, I just want to make a quick point about bird watching. I absolutely love watching the birds. I have chased many a heron down the Huron on river trips, kingfisher, all types of birds you will see on running water as well as still water. I'm not really clear on the logic behind why birds would magically disappear if the water is moving. And also, I think there's some interesting other elements that can be made with the vegetation that's put in there in terms of what we do attract. So if there is data, I'm sure that the Huron River Watershed Council is the people I would trust to get the data around what birds will and will not be attracted to the space.
Okay, thanks, Amanda. Bill, you are next. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes. And I should mention that we are Ypsilanti city residents since 30 years. We love this place and we love the nature in this area. Again, I would recommend eBird as a great source of data in terms of the birds that have been observed at these places, not just Peninsular Park, but just a little further downstream, Waterworks Park, and beyond that, North Bay, which is one of the top sites in the entire county for birds. North Bay and North Bay in particular, of course, has the lake and a marshy area, wetlands area. And that's where so many of the thousands of ducks, especially in the winter, come and other birds that you don't see otherwise. The only other place I've seen those kinds of ducks further upstream is actually at Peninsular Park and going up to Superior in that pond area. I think that that kind of waterfowl seems to really need that stiller water than the faster current.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Let's see. Let me see here. Okay, Bill, you are next. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you. So the purpose of the dam is an impoundment. At the time when the Peninsular Paper Company was running, they used the dam for the purpose of making paper. And now there is not paper being made. There are very few places that one can access the Huron River. One place is the Superior Road Bridge. You're not supposed to be on the railroad bridge that crosses the Huron. And Penn Dam Park represents probably the only access to the Huron River. And it is my sentiment that removal of the dam will degrade access to the river. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Phil. Tricia, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to bring up that there was discussion on what types of birds exist on the pond. Last week, I did put together a presentation which included photos from residents on the pond, which had many of the birds that would thrive on still water, but not fast moving water. And if that's made public information, feel free to take a look at it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tricia. All right, I'm gonna go ahead. And so a lot of you all have shared how you use the river, and it's just real, to the point. I kayak, or I'm an angler. Like I just to the point of just how you interact and engage with the river. I know we've taken some notes. If it hasn't been shared, kayaking, fishing, some have said, just talked about just being still with nature. This is a time if we have not reflect those. I think we've caught a lot of the ways bird watching that people have been able to interact with the river. But if we haven't, I'm going to go ahead and Maria, you should be able to unmute yourself. There you go, Maria.
Okay. Thank you, Summer. One thing that I hadn't brought up yet, but that has been a major way of interacting with the river for me has just been as an educational opportunity. It's amazing to be able to I've taken groups of little kids through Hike It Baby to go doing, basically little biological inventories of some of the macroinvertebrates and the different organisms that can be found in the river. I've never done that on the impoundment. It's not really tractable there, but in some of the free flowing sections of the Huron, it's awesome. And then also as I'm teaching an ecology lab this semester, and this is an amazing resource in EMU's backyard, and being able to take students to the river to show them some of the biodiversity there has been really cool. And yeah, just you can find more and a more interesting diversity of organisms for sure in those free flowing sections than we can in the impounded sections. But yeah, so the educational, and it's kind of a mix of educational and recreational activity, especially with the younger kids.
I'm muted. I'm like, okay, all right. Thanks, Maria. Beth, you are next, and you should be able to unmute yourself.
So I appreciate this question about the downriver use, because I use downriver quite a lot. My family spends a lot of time in Riverside Park. I really appreciate the work people have talked about putting into Penn Park, because our family just puts a lot of hours into Riverside. After big storms, we'll catch fish, we'll pull them out of the park, put them back in the river. Like, we care for this space. And I want to speak to that because I care for this whole river, and I care for Ypsilanti. And I've heard some people remark that the only thing that they care about here is the pond. And that is not what is the care for me. It is the city of Ypsilanti, the people in Ypsilanti, the river as a whole, because my family spends time on all of it. And we're going to continue spending our time in our lives on all of it. And so I just want to be clear that, like, to me, this is an entire relationship that we have for the duration of this river, for the portions of it that we steward, the infrastructure that's here, and the people that are impacted by it.
Thank you, Beth. All right. There we go. Okay. Marjorie, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you again, Summer. How do I use the river? Probably different from anyone else. And that is, I use it as a volunteer project to enhance the community of Ypsilanti. I do not kayak, although I do live on the river, and I love watching the river. I love the flow outside our window. I love watching the swans come in. and I love watching the birds. And in my front yard, I have a beautiful display of water lilies. But my main thing is to be philanthropic to the city of Ypsilanti, and that is why I joined the Friends of Peninsular Park. I was instrumental in getting a $1,000 grant from Community Financial Bank to help us, and I am capable and in a position to gather and get additional financial resources for that through my relationship with Friends of Peninsular Park. That does me a great service. That is how I use the river. I would love to continue it. I would love to continue giving and giving and giving, not destroying, not blowing up, but restoring and making the best of what we have.
Okay. Thank you. Let me see. I'm going to go. Laura, you should be able to unmute yourself.
And so I can. Thank you, Summer.
All right, cool.
And I think I like the river, in addition to some of the many of the activities other people have talked about. I like it as a place to be quiet. It's a pleasure to be near it, to watch the birds, to follow their lives along the river, and to enjoy that and be with other people who are enjoying it while that's happening.
Okay, I'm like, okay, thank you. All right, Sally, you should be able to unmute yourself. There you go.
Thank you, Summer. I wanted to share two things about this. One, I think that the questions have been focused on you, and we've been asked to say, what's our personal feeling and impact and concern and so on. So that's how we responded to this. But I wouldn't want Beth or others to think that we're not interested and supportive of the city. My husband and I serve on city committees. We've been involved since we moved here. We like the city, but we wouldn't have gotten here without the pond. So I think that I want to make clear that we really care about the city, but our questions that we're answering for this focus group was, how do you use the river? How do you feel about it? What's important to you? And that's how I geared my answers. I do have one comment about how it's important to me, and that is for mental health. There's a lot of research that has demonstrated that being able to look out at the water makes changes in the brain, releases various substances that relax you. It's neurochemicals. They promote wellness, increase blood flow to the brain and the heart, and increase relaxation. And my being able to look out at the pond does that for me. So thank you.
All right, thank you for that. Okay, I'm gonna go to the next question is, one, there's a lot of, people was just speaking, spoken about just the idea of accessible, that you have access through your from a property perspective, but just in general, I think it's important, to Ann's point earlier, just in terms of accessibility, right? So when you think about the river, do you think that the river is accessible to everyone, right? What are those access points in terms of those that don't have the ability to have property or live on the property, but to be able to access the river? How accessible do you think the river is to the community as a whole? So to your question, Sally, we talked about for you, this is specific. Like when you think about not to individuals, not to you all, but just in the sense of how accessible is it to everyone? Do you think it is? Do people perceive the river to be accessible from your community groups and what you're a part of? So I am, let's see, I'm going to go here to Georgina. I'm going to unmute. You should be able to unmute yourself now.
Thanks. I was actually thinking I'd speak to the previous question, but I like this one better.
Okay.
I can put them together. One of the ways I've used the river, I use it as a paddler, but also just as a natural space to be in. And that includes many, 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 many dog walks along the river, mostly through Riverside and Frog Island. And taking my kids, I've always appreciated the Riverside Park is a very natural park. And that at certain points anyway, the banks of the river are very accessible to people in the park. And so my kids poking sticks in, the icy edges of Riverside is just like one of my fondest memories of raising my kids here. So to that point, the parts of the river upstream of Frog Island feel incredibly inaccessible. And some of that is because of Peninsular Park's current status. But even there, to get to the pond, as far as I know, it's just that, you can park, but then there's that long haul up and there's just a little space in. And so some of it's visibility, lack of pathways, just the way the park, but I don't know where else to go to access a lot of that, at least not in any sort of official way. And Anne mentioned how dangerous the stairs are and other things. And so I would really like to see many more stretches of the river become accessible, both to use the river, but even the poke along the banks or catch more views of the river. I want it to be a lot more visible. So I have hopes that this project will do some of that. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say to that point, when you're saying I think it's key when you said I don't even know where to the information, how to, how is it communicated from a wayfinding perspective or communication about how to access the river points as well. So thank you for that, Virginia, for sure. Phil and you're after Phil. Go ahead, Phil. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you. I chose my dwelling because of proximity to the impoundment. Before I even lived here, one of the aspects of paddling between Peninsular Dam and the Superior Dam was being able to explore upriver. There's not a lot of development along the river. It's pretty wild. And having the flat water and the wide, quiet water, provides quite a nice tour. And I think that removal of the dam is not going to provide better access. Removal of the dam is not going to provide better access to the river. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And you should be able to unmute yourself.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I would say that it is accessible. I mean, I think that the Huron River Watershed, has published their little paddle thing, which shows you markers along the Huron where you can access the river. But I want to say that when the city acquired the Peninsula Park, it was designed according to what the city residents said at that time. They wanted a fishing spot and somewhere to sit along the river, right? So it wasn't designed initially for people to enter and exit. That's one of the reasons we put in that floating dock, so that as people came down, and that's a long stretch. If you decide to canoe from Ann Arbor down, that's a long stretch that you could get out and portage around. But it was originally designed so that it was a fishing spot because of the residents indicating they wanted a spot where they could stand and fish. So its original design, how it is now, wasn't for canoeing, but I think that there's access, and I think that improving upon that access would be important for citizens at this point. But I think the original intent was for people to fish, which they do. People come from Detroit to do that and have access. But I think that putting in that floating dock and building it out, which I've seen Argo and others building it out so that people could have greater ease of access, I guess, would be important.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, Sally, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Summer. My concern is for my friends across the river in terms of their access, because I have seen nothing in the planning about how these mudflats get remediated, and then how do they get to access the river with their canoes, paddleboards, kayaks, whatever. it's going to rule out there, if the dam is removed, it's going to rule out the use of the rowboats and the pontoon boats that the people have. But even in terms of access for other watercraft, how will they be able to do it? Will they be allowed to build walkways out into the mudflats? What's going to happen? And I haven't seen anything about this in the reports that have been done.
Okay, thank you, Sally. Laura, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Thank you. I appreciate the fact that people have reported on the number of people interested in fishing. And I think that's an area where we could probably see even more accessibility needed. I know because people come by and ask if they can fish off the back of our property, which we can usually arrange for. But it's, I think it's something that may be even more desired than we have accessibility for among a larger group of people.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. So the other thing, you know, just, and I think it's important is, you know, a lot of people share their, you know, their excitement about being a part of the river and using the river. Like, what was your entry point to the, like, how did you start kayak? Like, was it, you know, how did you start to kayak? How you're a paddler? Like, what is it for just in the terms of the use of the, you know, the use of the river? What was your entry point? How did you get introduced to it? Okay, go ahead, Ann.
You know, and it was through the Huron River Watershed Council, to be honest. Talking about it, I reached out to Laura Rubin because I was chair of the Park Commission at that time and said to her, you know, what can we do to make sure, one, that citizens understand that this is, the river runs through the entire city, right? It runs all through 4 miles of the city from, you know, up where Peninsula Park is on down to the one that's down there by the Ford plant. So she talked to me about kayaking, and we, as I said, we hosted the first Huron River Water Day in 2016 and partnered with the livery in Ann Arbor to make sure that the citizens had access and the availability to learn that. So, you know, that's how I was first introduced to it and have continued with that. I didn't participate if the recreation department had one in the last 2 years, but we did that several years in a row, one, to give citizens access so that, one, they could get on the water and enjoy it for recreational purposes, but also to introduce people to something new.
Yep. Okay. Georgina, I see you next. You're after, all right, hold on. Let me just make sure I got, all right, Phil, you should be able to unmute yourself. And then Georgina, you're next after Phil.
Thank you. My access to the river started in the late 80s. There's a gentleman named Ned Sharpless who owned a canoe store called Paddle Sport, which was right across from the Argo Canoe Livery. And Ned sponsored what he called the Ice Out Challenge. So we would start up at the dam at Portage Lake and then paddle on down to the Ypsilanti Park there. So I've literally paddled several times from Portage Lake down to Ypsilanti and past this area. So that was my entry point.
Okay.
Thank you.
Georgina, what about you? You should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay. I grew up in Michigan. I grew up paddling, but exploring the Huron came more from my kids. My son and I would tube the Cascades, and he, like many little kids, wanted to keep going. So we started tubing as far as we thought we could and still grab our tubes and walk back. Fuller Road was about the extent of it. And that sort of sparked an interest. And I took an adventure buddy and a kayak, and we tried the whole run all the way down to Spring Street pullout. And what was fascinating for me in doing that is I thought I knew Ann Arbor and Ypsi really, really well, but seeing them from the river was different. And there were moments where I didn't know where I was. And that was fascinating. Definitely the slog at Superior Dam and Penn Dam were the worst parts of the trip. but it was just a fascinatingly different way to see the city, to see the hospital, see the water processing plant, stuff that I just didn't even know was there. And the kayak on which I do all of this now is a beater kayak that I bought at the Gallup Liveries auction that they do in the spring and sometimes in the fall. And it's absolutely great. People have been talking about the river as a fast water river. It's really not that fast water river. It's very accessible for people learning to paddle. And there's a lot of really accessible watercrafts for folks to give it a try on. And I think that makes it really an appealing place to do it. And it's pretty shallow. So if things get sketchy, you just step out.
That's what I need. I need the shallow. I need the shallow. The way that my non-swimming is set up, I need this shallow. So
where your personal flotation device.
All right, thank you. Dan, I see your hand. Did you want to share?
Yeah, so just real quick, Ann brought up Ipsy Fall River Day, so I just wanted to provide a quick side note on that. So those have been going on, and thanks to Ann for jumpstarting that that event. So the short version is we haven't had them. We didn't have one last year. I think it's looking like it's unlikely that we'll have one this year. And the short explanation is that it's challenging with COVID concerns and some other things that have come up that are unrelated to anything that we're talking about here. But it's a favorite day for me out of everything that we do is getting people out on the river in Ypsilanti. So we'll start those back up as soon as we can.
All right, awesome. All right, Jesse. Hey, now we got a new one. Jesse, I'm gonna unmute you there, Jesse, for you to be able to unmute yourself.
Hey, thank you very much. I've been watching the whole thing, but I was riding the bus home and I didn't think anyone would hear me if I tried talking over the roar of the engine.
All right, shout out to public transportation. All right,
yes, very much a shout out to public transportation. So I've had a lot to say. I just haven't had a chance to say it. But on this one, I grew up in Dexter when the Mill Creek Dam was still in place. So I watched that transformation. So that was my exposure to the river. Tubing as a young child with my friends down the river. Our parents dropping us off at one end and picking us up at the other, and then when we were getting older, doing canoe trips from Hudson Mills Park or Delhi down to, or excuse me, not Delhi, the Bell Road Bridge down to Huron Metro or Delhi. So I've grew up with the river and continued to enjoy it since I moved to Ypsilanti. And having grown up in Dexter and having watched, the pond behind Mill Creek Dam was fine, but my parents still live in town. When I go to visit them, I've seen how much that downtown has come alive, with a life I didn't know was even possible growing up. So I'm excited for the possibilities for Ypsilanti. This is where I've lived here for 15 years, and my kids are born here. My wife was raised here. This is where we're staying, and I'm excited to see this happen.
All right, thank you. Let's see, Beth, you're next, and then Maria, you are after Beth. You should be able to unmute yourself, Beth.
Hey, Summer, I love this question, and I'll try to be as brief as I can. I moved to this area about 12 years ago, and having lived abroad, coming up here and experiencing the river really restored the sense of home for me that I really found is part of what's made me fall in love with being in Michigan. And then in my work doing climate change adaptation, which is where you prepare for the impacts of climate change, I started working with the Huron River Watershed Council about 10 years ago now. And we were doing some of the leading work in how you look at a river and how you look at the users of the river and the lands around the river and impoundments on the river. And you think about what can happen with this river, with this users, with this infrastructure so that you can be better prepared for the impacts of climate change. I've watched the river be a vehicle for us here doing leading work that people follow throughout the country. And it's inspired me to stay here. Since I moved to Ypsilanti, the river has been what brought me together with my friends. And I would say it's like the river, there's what got us through the pandemic, being able to go out there, be on the water, be someplace that we could be together, apart, outside. And so it's been foundational for me in kind of finding a sense of home, in building a career, building leadership, setting examples of how do we actually look to the future. And then really finding a place that I know I'm going to spend probably the rest of my life with people that I love.
All right, thanks, Beth. Maria, you are next. You should, yep, there you go.
Thank you, Summer. So I kind of had two entry points. I first really started interacting with the river when I moved here, and I was teaching at Marygrove College, and I wanted to teach some sections on aquatic ecology. And so having easy access to a place that had a cool diversity of benthic macroinvertebrates that I could sample and bring back to my students was awesome. And that was when I first really started looking at river access and interacting with the river. But I think that my love for this river and this whole aquatic ecosystem, it was transformed when I had a kid, and when, as a stir crazy parent, I spent hours and hours hiking with my kid strapped to me, finding every entry point, every place that we could interact with the river. I scrambled with my little baby all over every part of Penn Park that I could get to, trying to think about how we could take advantage of this amazing resource, and trying to think about all the ways we get out on the water. And like Beth, the river has been a major, one of our major escapes, and one of the ways that we've really coped through the pandemic. And getting the chance to have my 6, just now 7-year-old start to take some small risks and do some of those moving water trips this summer has been so exciting and so much fun. And it's seeing the river through my child's eyes has really been one of the major ways that I've been pulled into interacting more with the river, and one of the things that has motivated me to find more opportunities to access more parts of the river.
Okay, great. So Mark, you, and then Amanda, you're after Mark. Mark, you should be able to unmute yourself now. Right. 7, yeah, 7. Okay, awesome. Amanda, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi. Yeah. For me, my first interaction with the river was really through the liveries that exist at Argo and Gallup Park. Those were the places that felt the most accessible for me to have an entry point to interacting with the river. It wasn't until I met some of the most wonderful people in the city of Ypsilanti that helped introduce me to the other ways that I can interact on my own with the river. But I say that to make the point that if we were to create something in Ypsilanti where we could help others have that entry point, have, a space where people could rent a canoe or kayak, or have a space where people are being taught and encouraged to interact with the river here right in our backyard, that would be absolutely incredible. I don't need to go to Ann Arbor for that stuff. I'd like to do it here.
Okay. Thank you, Amanda. So this is the last question before we just open it up. And I do want to make sure that we're specific, what is your vision, right? Like, what is the vision of like the river and the park? I mean, I know, and you gave some very tangibles, like, fixing benches and the stairs. I mean, there are some tangibles that you gave. So more of a vision of the park. I know that for some, the vision is not to remove the dam. Got that, right? We have that recorded from last time, so we don't have to. We want to be mindful of timing. We only, we got a few minutes. We got 26 minutes left before the 10 o'clock time, and want to make sure that we're mindful of everybody's time to get their feedback in for open. So specific to just thinking more from a visionary perspective, like, how would you like to see the park, or how would you like to see the river? What are those? A couple people talked about a couple of access points to get to the river and a canoe launch pad and some of those things. We're looking for things more along those lines versus the vision of that has already been recorded. I just want to make sure that we're giving opportunity for those that have not expressed their vision. The vision of it is at this time. So Amanda, you should be able to unmute yourself.
All right. So my vision for this park is that we have a beautiful, clean space where folks can interact with the river in many different ways, that there's a little spots on the river that are more like wetlands and spots on the river that have, cascades or rushing water that we can use in that space. If there's ways to incorporate some slower water, great. It sounds like some people want that. But if we can diversify the space as much as possible in a way that promotes the health of the water, the health of all of the creatures that live there, and that encourages the entirety of our community to be invited into this space in a way that right now doesn't feel possible.
Okay, great. Thanks, Amanda. And you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thanks. My vision would be, and I'm not quite sure, it's off of, I want to say Superior. No, it's off of Dixboro Road, maybe. There's a turnoff there for the Getty's piece that you can drive down and park there. And there's the fishing port where people can walk and stand by the river and fish, but there's also a place where you can just go and sit. And I think that's the most beautiful place actually in our community, because it is right outside of Ypsi, but it's probably Superior Township, but it's probably the most beautiful stretch of the river to me, because one, anybody can access that point. I mean, it's, if you're disabled or whatever, you can drive up there, you can get out your car or bike there. People often pedal there. I mean, I walk there every morning, but for me, that would be it, that people get out of their, you see the, what are those folk that do the canoeing every morning, the rowing team. You see the rowing team out there every morning. So for me, that would be ideal, that people get out of their canoes, they portage around and get back in on the other side, but it is accessible for everyone. And it's, a good walking trail or running trail there, but you can also just stand there or sit in your car if you so choose, to watch the water run past and to watch those people rowing and to see people enjoying the river. And there's a house that sits up there. There's one house that sits up there and several behind, but people often come out and sit on their deck or veranda and watch the row team, and they watch the citizens walk past. And wave, So for me, that would be ideal. That because people talk about Peninsula Park, but they probably don't know it as intimately, I hate to say, as I do, because I've lived with it for years. It's narrow. It's very narrow. It's a strip, right? So when people talk about a park, it's not like you're going to have equipment in there. It's none of that, I don't believe, would be doable there. It's a very narrow strip. So some of that would be parking. So I think that location that I'm describing, and I'm not quite sure if it's off Superior Road or Dixboro, but it's just where you can drive your car and park, or people can get out and walk and sit. So for me, that would be ideal.
Okay. All right, Marjorie, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Summer. I appreciate it. Someone mentioned in the last session about finding a sense of home. And I think that's a very important element to the vision of the river and the park. I would advocate for the restoration and not the demolishment of where we are going. The reason is things are okay, things are fine. If you look at the Huron River Council report, there are areas that really should be re-looked at. An example would be, number one, the property values. Last week at the meeting with the property owners, Sally Lust mentioned that she disagreed with the property value statement that Dan Brown put forward, and that is there was another alternative and another opinion about the property values. I could go on with several others, but I know I don't want to take up the time. I do believe that that report is flawed and should be amended. So I would challenge the fine group at the Huron River Council to do that. As far as the vision, restoration is kinder to the environment, kinder to the species that live here, kinder to the people who live on it. And that would be my vision. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura, you should be able to unmute yourself. And then Jesse, you can, after Laura. Go ahead, Laura.
Thank you. I wanted to add to the picture of accessibility that Anne put forward and say, I also hope we can pay attention to the sort of diversity of activities that aren't strictly in and on the river. So that for bird watching, for hiking, for sitting and enjoying the space and quiet, and for gathering together socially, that all those can be included, particularly in the park.
Okay, thank you. Jesse, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you. So my vision, I think, is a lot like Anne's. I want a place where where people can congregate. So I live near Rec Park, and every weekend there's some folks out there having a cookout. And I think, there's a lot of people who live around Penn Park, and that needs to stay available to them. It needs to be improved. Someone mentioned earlier clearing out the invasive species, because that park can get pretty claustrophobic with all the overgrowth if it's not maintained. I want to see a park where people can enjoy the wildlife. Like I kayaked down from Argo to Gallup this past weekend with my son. We saw a merganser and we saw a blue heron. We saw some turtles on a log, and I want to be able to see that from Penn Park. And I like the flowing water. I find flowing water very relaxing. Someone mentioned earlier, I guess there's scientific evidence that looking out over water has scientifically demonstrated health benefits. I didn't know that, but water is water, and whether it's moving or still, that I think having that flowing river going by, that river that flows through Ypsilanti, that's what I'm looking for.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jesse. Sally, you should be able to unmute yourself. See your hand up.
Thank you, Summer. Am I unmuted now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, it was still there. I didn't know whether to read that or not. So I would like to see the park improved. I think it needs a lot of general maintenance and improvement. And I think that can be done and should be done with retaining the dam. And I think like I said before, I'd be happy to see the kind of fast water chute that's at Argo Dam. I think that'd be great for people who want that. So, but I certainly see the dam as being an essential part of enjoying that park. It's a feature, the flowing water, that sound, that view is also part of that research that indicates that It's a very healthful thing. It has physical and psychological benefits. So I'm answering in terms of my vision of the park, but without the removal of the dam.
All right, got it. Thank you, Sally. Theo, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you. So regarding my vision of the river and park with the removal of the dam, first of all, I'm not exactly clear where the timbers are on the Penn Dam that would allow for gradual drainage. I wonder if the gentleman who spoke of the timbers at Penn Dam could guide us as to whether this is on the north side of the dam or the south side of the dam. So I'm not exactly sure how the impoundment would be drained gradually. As folks may know, the powerhouse has been filled with dirt. And I think that with the removal of the dam, I think that there would be ruins uncovered and it would look pretty ugly. I think that access to flowing water of the river, having the impoundment drained, would need to be maintained. And I don't know that the city of Ypsilanti would want to take on that responsibility given the desire to remove the dam. I think that my vision of the dam removal would be that the open water, I just think the open water is more pleasant than having the dam removed would provide. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So I definitely want to be mindful of time. We have 15 minutes left. We're going to just open it up. If people have general questions or comments that was not addressed that would like to share, again, we want to use this as an opportunity for those. We've had the session last week. A lot of people shared their opinions. Those are all recorded. We want to be able to create a platform for everybody to express their feelings. So to that point, if we can be mindful, since we only have the 14 minutes left, and I am going to have to put the timer on because, again, we want to try to get people in. I need us to be mindful to yield to people who have not shared first, so that we could try to get as many perspectives on the table that has not been expressed during this time. So to that point, Ann, I see your hand is up. I'm going to start the clock, and you should be able to unmute yourself.
Great. And I'm not going to take long. I just want to make a couple points because I won't probably be able to make the next meeting. And that is, as a city resident, and I indicated 43 years, I've seen the city of Ypsilanti go through a number of things, Water Street just being one. So I want to make sure that the Huron River Watershed Council and all of those that are particularly city residents that are advocates for the removal, that you take into consideration, and I'm not a landowner, but I want to make sure as a city resident that all the cost is considered in terms of what happens upon removal, what happens to the property owners in terms of the remediation or mediation, and that cost is considered, because one of the things I don't want to see happen is similar to things. And again, I've been a longtime resident, so I've seen a lot of things happen in the city of Ypsilanti that was not positive for the residents, that they are left with having to store that stuff, store any hazard material, because that can be costly. I want to make sure that, we know without a shadow of doubt that if that stuff is removed, that we're not causing harm to the residents along the river. And the second thing for me is to make sure that when you talk about money being raised, and this happens a lot in communities, when people say, we're committed to raising the money. For me, that's not good enough. You need to have the money up front, because I don't want to see, if the dam is removed, that we're left with not having enough money to make sure that those residents along the river and that the park itself is not made whole. So those are my two big things. One, that the city is not left trying to haul off dirt and store it somewhere that we have to pay for. And the second thing is that that money is in the bank or in the city's coffer somewhere, so that residents and the park is made whole, so that we aren't left saying that we're committed to raising funds, because we all know sometimes money dries up, funders dry up, all of that happens. So I want to make sure that there is a commitment on the table, that money will be raised for those residents and for the park on the front end. And the last thing for me, I think there was two, and that the last thing is that we engage more citizens. I think this process has been very closed. I think that there have been a select number of people that have been involved, that it has not been inclusive, and that needs to change. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Trisha, I'm going to go ahead and you should be able to unmute yourself and start the clock.
Okay. All right. Well, this will be short because Anne pretty much summed up a lot of the thoughts that I had. I just want to state one more thing. I was a little disappointed to hear that the last meeting that we had, where we really discussed a lot of issues, it was distilled down to property value and ownership of land. And that's not all that's important to the homeowners on the river. And I just want to make sure that that's somehow communicated about all the issues that we talked about. I haven't seen any notes. I haven't seen anything made public as far as like the presentation I provided. All I saw was the presentation that was given by the city and the Watershed Council. And then this brief summary at the beginning of this meeting, which said that property values and ownership of land were concerns. So just want to get it across that that's not an accurate picture. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to be clear, just in terms of the process, that's what we're going through now, is actually gathering the information to provide a report that will be, that will be shared publicly. So it's not to, we have to go through each one of the different groups and the stakeholders after the next general meeting. And then once we're coming into that last meeting in October, we would have a report that will essentially, all of the feedback from the community will then be, submitted to the DNR as a part of it. So just as an FYI, that is, these are focus groups specific to get the information and then put together a report. Jesse, I just unmuted you, so you should be able to, for your comments and starting the clock.
All right, thank you. I'm also not going to be able to make any of the other meetings, so I just wanted to say that I do support dam removal as a city resident. Understanding, and I see it as an ongoing liability that we have a chance to remove, and I'm just very thankful to the city employees and the city staff and city council members who are working on this. As I said earlier, I've seen what a dam removal can do to rejuvenate a river. You think it's full of life, and then you see what can happen when you remove these man-made interventions that shouldn't have been installed in the first place, and just what it can do for a community. I think it should be done intelligently. I think it should be done cautiously, and I trust that as we move forward, the amount of time that we're spending on this, I'm hopeful that we're doing this the right way. And as a last comment, Summer, I've just want to say thank you for all your work on public transportation and the M1 rail. I'm kind of aware who you are, so I just wanted to I'm just glad to see that you are involved in this. Thank you for making sure that people's voices are heard in an equitable fashion. So thanks very much.
All right, thanks, Jesse. All right, Beth, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thanks, Summer. I know that I appreciate the time at the end of this and just wanted to throw a couple of pieces onto the record. The Biden administration's infrastructure and investment bill has included $1.6 billion for dam removal. The removal of dams is a priority for this administration. It's a priority for the EPA. And obsolete infrastructure across the country is a significant problem. The idea that things are working well isn't accurate. Our climate's not working well. It's not working the way that it has historically. Precipitation is increasing dramatically in our region. Severe storms are increasing dramatically, and that's going to continue to occur. The recent report that we saw last week from the IPCC tells us that those changes that are already with us are going to continue, and there's no amount of mitigation that's going to curb the effect of climate change that we're going to be feeling for the near future. our options are best when we use the natural system to respond to our human errors. And that's really, to me, what centers these conversations. Many of the things that we vision and imagine for this space are the same: access, use, community, culture. But to me, the removal of the dam is a critical step in ensuring that we're preparing our community for the future, not trying to tie it to a past, which is really no longer serving us and in fact going to endanger us. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Beth. Mark, you should be able to unmute yourself, and I'm going to start the clock. Okay, thank you, Mark. Yvonne, you now have the floor, and I will start the clock.
Thank you. I wanted to also support what Ann Brown had just said. I think I've tried to stay pretty involved with city activities, but something was alluded to at the last meeting that we've had, that we've been kept informed all along, and that we knew about the meetings that there's something that has been going on. My gut's telling me something has gone on behind the scenes that we are not aware of. And I think that needs to be taken into consideration. And I don't know what meetings our city council representatives are talking about where the issue have come up from the dam, other than the public meeting at which it was approved, much to violations, from my point of view, to Robert's Rules of Order. So I think that, keeping that in mind, I think it's important for us to be able to move forward, to have no hidden agendas on the table. And I also I don't operate from a paternalistic, father knows best attitude. And that's somehow what I'm picking up, and from the history of this. Someone has had their mind made up, and it's not always in the best interest of the citizens. And there's a lot of financial ramifications for anyone who lives in the city. And I think that that's something that has to be seriously taken into consideration.
All right. Thank you so much, Yvonne. Sally, I will go ahead and let y'all unmute. You actually are the last one for comment, since but you should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you, Summer. I will be fairly brief, so there might be room for somebody else after me. But what I wanted to say was I too believe that a lot of the information that was provided in the slides as an orientation may not be up to date or completely accurate. And since the federal government is considering a legislation that would support restoration of hydropower, and there's not been recent investigation of what it would actually cost to implement that, I'm concerned that it's presented that it's not feasible to consider that for this dam. And so I would like much more pertinent and recent, up-to-date information.
All right. Awesome. All right. So we got like a minute and a half. I don't know if anybody, I think I think we've been able to open it up to everyone. There will be another, another engagement meeting that will actually be 2 weeks from today, I believe. Yeah. And then next week is, so there'll be other correspondence. That's a general meeting. That's for anyone who's, willing to come out and to share, within these conversations. I know Ann asked specifically about making sure that we continue to get, the word out, and we would definitely, talk about that more intentionally about what that is. But I do want to be, again, mindful of time because we have reached the 9:59 mark. Ben, I see you have your hand, so if you got 45 seconds, that's all we got. So you better make it happen in 45 seconds, brother. That's what we got because we had 10 o'clock. So what you got, Ben?
Okay. Thank you. I think it's clear from what people are saying that we have a trust issue, that people are bringing up a bunch of issues, and we need to trust that those issues are being heard. And saying that, oh, we're just collecting all of this. We're not going to show you that what was said last week has been heard. We're not going to show you that what has been said this week has been heard. We're going to wait until we present the report, and then you'll be able to see that it's been heard, but there's no opportunity for feedback at that point. So I think you need to think about this process and make sure that there are ways that everybody involved in this process knows that they've been heard, because there's a strong sense that there's a real decision, that the decision has already been made. And that this is kind of a charade to hear from us, but really all the decisions have been made. So you need to show us that we have been heard. And I'm speaking, Summer, you're the person who helps the city council and the watershed authority understand that. Daniel, you've been presenting some things that really get across the notion that really the decision has been made. So you too should be trying to tell us we're weighing all of the sides, but you have been heard.
Yeah, no, for sure. I would thank you for your time. It's 10:01. We understand. Obviously through an engagement process and where we are now, that has been conversations that we have had, right? Trust is in anything we are dealing with, anything with municipality government, period. This is no different than any other municipal project when people in government specifically, that trust is a part of that. And so we do understand that. That's the reason why we've talked about timelines and understanding that, being clear on what that is and continuing to share the information. And so Marjorie, I see you, giving me the talk, at the end of the day, it's not the talk. Like, this is a part of the process, right? And so a part of the process is to be able to collect the information in order for it to be registered to have, again, Dan made it clear, like, it takes time for the dam removals to happen. These are all things that have to happen before it happens. So toxic reports and reports, all the different things in terms of going to, property owners and the things that are concerned, all of those still have to be flushed out, right? So is the conversation about, hey, the city would like to be able to remove the dam? Absolutely. Does the city understand that these are the steps they have to take in order to remove the dam? Absolutely. And this is a part of one of those steps. So as a part of the process, yes, that is what we will continue to do, is to make sure that there is building trust, because we're very clear. This is no different than any other project that people have concerns about trust, and we will continue to do that as well, to build that as much as possible. That's why we said, hey, we want a repository, have everything online. We said we're going to post the documents by Monday. Again, these are focus groups, right? So the concept of the focus group is to get the information, then put them into reports. So it is different than what people are accustomed to within it, is to get the feedback and then to synthesize it. Obviously, if anybody wanted to, we put the notes, we typed them up while we were here. If people wanted to screenshot them, you could have did that. Like at the end of the day, we're being transparent. That's why we've been taking the notes online, keeping it open. But it is a process within it. And so we'll continue to build that and make sure that the city and the Huron Rivershed, Huron River Watershed Council and everybody is aligned with that. So not talk, it's a process. And we're happy that everybody was able to hang out for 3 hours and 4 minutes. And I know some people were, we had a longer day this day than last week, and we'll continue to pound the pavement and get what we need to get done. So thank you all for your time, your commitment to our community holistically, and understanding how we're all interconnected. And everyone have a great night.